Yeah.
Isn't there? Do we have our? Oh, you don't have your thing either.
To be all started.
Okay, so we can go ahead and start. It's like 6:03. We can go ahead and open the meeting and call roll.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tuesday, June 24th, HRB meeting. Jonathan Stone.
Here.
Cindy Toll.
Here.
Derek Metzen.
Here.
Chair McLaughlin.
Here.
Yeah.
So do we have?
Should be, is it not showing up on your?
Sorry.
I just have call to order. I mean, like our whole our
if you go to
evening thing.
agenda, that's on the floor.
Oh wait. Oh,
Agenda.
I'm sorry.
I don't have the screen.
This one?
Yeah, no.
This one right here?
No, the other one. I only have the,
Oh, the call to order screen?
yeah.
Here,
Oh.
give me a second.
Do I have to sign, maybe if I sign
Yeah.
in, and I'll have it.
This is what we're supposed to sing it to.
There it is. She's supposed to
Yeah.
sign in. Push your name and sign in.
There we go.
All right.
There, I'm sorry. Okay, so we've called to order. We have a presentation on.
I don't have the presentation.
Right. There you go.
Oh, agenda. Sorry.
I forgot to. PC 14-070 Lynn Avenue, Leland Road, and Myers Road corridor plan.
All right, thank you, Chair McLaughlin. I'm going to be introducing John Burrell with our Public Works Department. He's going to give you a overview of this pretty ambitious, but I think really exciting improvement plan that's kind of taken a lot of parts of the roads of the city in a corridor that's had a lot of places with no sidewalks, not as safe routes to get people to and from. The reason that John is here tonight is the very beginning or end, depending on where you want to start, where Lynn Avenue hits 5th, hits our boundary of our McLaughlin Conservation District. And we like to bring in any project, public project, that touches or is inside our boundary. While this one is really just within the block of the Conservation District, I wanted to make sure that the board understood what was going on, how it related to the larger plan of connecting up the Lynn Avenue and Leland and Myers Road corridor. And one question I'll be asking the board tonight after the presentation is, based on what you've heard, is there any additional information you want to see from Public Works, or do you feel that this is enough and they can move forward without any additional formal review?
Okay, thank you, Christina. I'm John Burrell with the City of Oregon City Public Works Department. I'm one of the, I'm part of the engineering department. I'm one of the project managers, and this is one of the projects I'm working on. The overall project came out of the city's transportation system plan, and it is a variety of different projects that got put together into one overall project to guide development through that corridor, as it is one of the major thoroughfares up and down the hill. And the main emphasis of this project was to address the pedestrian and bicycle facility needs and improve the safety and multimodal transportation. And the project starts, I guess, there's a couple of handouts that I gave you, one packet and then another one that shows the neighborhood association. So the very top of the page is where kind of what we're concerned with, and it's 5th and Jackson. From that point up the hill through the Warner-Milne-Warner-Parrott intersection, down through the Leland-Myers-Claremont intersection to Moccasin Way off of Myers Road is the corridor. Beyond Moccasin Way, there's pretty good infill of sidewalks and striped for bike lanes. So one of the reasons that I'm here is this amends our transportation system plan, which is a part of a comprehensive plan. So we have to go through the legislative process, and public outreach and public involvement is a big part of that. And we've done a variety. I've gone to all these different neighborhood association meetings, Transportation Advisory Committee, CIC. We had an open house 2 weeks ago, and it was well attended, actually. And then also, because we're touching on the border of the McLaughlin district, as Christina mentioned, wanted to come here and find out if there's anything that we need to take into account as we're finalizing our report, so that we're not missing anything. And the Planning Commission work session last night, they were very positive about this, and so we feel like we can put it in a final form and take it to them at a regular meeting for their approval, or recommendation to go to the City Commission. So Just want to make sure we're not missing anything through the HRB. I mean, that's kind of it. It is a very, very small portion of the project touches the McLaughlin district.
Sure. Can you explain
But
kind of what the sidewalks would
yeah.
be, right? at
So
that
what I
point?
did here, the whole corridor, our consultants, Wallace Engineering, they broke it up into 4 segments because there's kind of 4 distinct sections of this whole corridor, and this is segment 1, is what we're calling it. It's from 5th and Jackson to Park Drive, basically getting you up to the top of the hill. If you were to turn right on Park Drive, it takes you right to Rivercrest Park. And from there on, it's fairly flat. So this segment here has Singer Creek Park, and also off to the side, there's Waterboard Park, there's Rivercrest Park in this segment. And, we feel they're probably underutilized as far as families walking and biking there. They feel like they have to drive because it doesn't feel very safe.
Right.
A lot of the comments that we heard at the open house were that they wish people would slow down on Lynn because there aren't sidewalks. They're walking on the shoulder. They feel unsafe doing it if they have to.
Mm-hmm.
So this segment 1, we've proposed 2 alternatives on this. Alternative A would be basically on the uphill section, or let's see, what would it be, the north, southeast, the west side, would be like a 10-foot wide shared use path. It would be raised, kind of like a sidewalk. There would be a curb and everything. So pedestrians and bicycles in either direction could use that. We figured, bicyclists pedaling up that hill are probably going just about as fast as somebody walking anyway, and so the shared use path made sense. And you can see on the downhill side, on alternative A, it would have a little bit wider shoulder. Bicyclists, it felt comfortable riding there. I have ridden there when City Hall was at the top of the hill, and I was riding back and forth to work, and I was going as fast as the cars were going down the hill. So, but we would have, for like families and children, a wider path to ride downhill. The other alternative has sidewalks on both sides, and only a bicycle lane in the uphill direction, a climbing lane. And then the downhill lane would have the sharrows. The cars would have to share that lane with bicyclists. So we've put those 2 options out, and we're asking people if they have a preference between those 2 alternatives.
And what kind of comments did you get?
So far, I haven't added everything up, but all of the planning commissioners liked alternative A with the shared use path on the one side. It would actually be the other side of the street from Singer Creek Park. But one of the things we're looking at is Electric Avenue, which is right here. Here's Charmin and Electric, and those 2 roads make that little triangle there, and Singer Creek is across the road, is looking at closing Electric Avenue. And because there actually has been a high proportion of accidents right there, people trying to enter or
Isn't
exit.
that triangle privately owned?
Yes.
Is
And
the city
actually,
trying
right
to-
on the other side of the road, a little stretch of that property along that path in Singer Creek Park is owned by that same individual.
Is there some way to, does the creek go through right there in that little triangle? Is there
The
any-
creek doesn't go through there, but up in the Rivercrest neighborhood, there's some drainage that comes down through that way.
But has the city ever tried to purchase that triangle?
We haven't tried to yet, but that's one of those options that's on the table as far as this whole corridor to. This is conceptual in nature, so the only money we're spending is just getting the report together, and then we can, direct developers, or if we were able to get grants, we can direct ourselves on how to develop it. And those are details that would actually get looked at if funds did become available, because by adding sidewalks and impervious area, we're required to deal with stormwater. And so there's very limited available spaces for stormwater treatment along this section of this whole corridor. And you're not allowed, we couldn't just pipe it directly to Singer Creek. That's, not allowed by any of the regulatory agencies. So we'd have to deal with it some way first before we could allow that discharge to go into one of our natural drainage ways. And that would be a possible area where, we could look at purchasing that and making it some sort of a stormwater treatment facility. Another option that's part of this is Pearl Street, and then across the street, Oak comes down off of East. It's a steep drive. They're offset. And they're proposing to realign Pearl. There's a big empty space. It's owned by an individual. It's a private lot, so that's another thing. You know,
On
we
that
would have to
corner.
negotiate with somebody. But if you realign Pearl so that it lined up with Oak, then there's what is paved now in Pearl is another space that could
Yeah.
conceivably used in the future for stormwater treatment facilities before it was discharged into the creek. So there's different options. Below that, we would have to look at some sort of a regional-wide treatment type of an option below Pearl Street.
So when Lynn comes around and makes that hook and turns into Fifth, and it's kind of an embankment up.
Yeah.
Is that city property where that goes up, or is
Part of that's right away and part of that's a private parcel. We'd have to
So-
really get it surveyed to identify it, but our OC map is fairly accurate at showing property lines.
But going around that curve with
Mhm.
that steep slope on that side, is
Yep.
the long-term plan to cut that back and make it wider, or just leave it?
Well, that's right now. I'm just making an assumption. I'm assuming that some sort of construction into that hillside to accommodate
Yeah.
either a sidewalk or a shared use path would be
Sure.
something that would have to happen. Those details would get looked at once we, started to do the design on those. And yet we realize that this is, it's really steep terrain. It's known as a geologic hazard areas. We've got a, water quality overlay district. So there's a lot of things that would have to get looked at to try and develop this segment of the corridor. And yeah, definitely, it wouldn't be cheap because there's going to be a lot of extensive retaining wall work that would have to happen. But those are things once they've been identified, and our consultants will be putting together some rough cost estimates to, they will identify the constraints, the things that would need to be addressed in a real actual design, and give us some rough cost estimates based on what they foresee right now, the needs being if you were going to develop this whole corridor based on our plan. So those costs would be looked at.
This is just my first observance of this. Is there any reason why they didn't put a dedicated bike lane on either side of the road on either one of these alternatives?
Well, they're on alternative A. The bike lane would be the shared use path on the uphill direction.
Yeah, but
It's
I'm
10
saying
foot
a
wide.
dedicated bike lane. Why would they do that instead of put a dedicated bike lane there?
It was just one of the alternatives because when you're going uphill, it's very steep. And like I said,
Well,
somebody
if they got
riding a
too tired, they
bicycle.
could jump off onto the sidewalk. But you don't have that on the other.
Well,
alternative
we're
either.
very constrained in width
Is
through
that it?
there
Mhm.
because of the topography, just like was noted,
Right.
the retaining walls, the creek that runs
So
by
there's
there.
not enough road for
There is
a dedicated bike
property
lane
lanes.
on both sides.
On average, the right-of-way is roughly 60 feet wide in through there. This is a minor arterial, and our actual design standards, minimum width, if we were going to design this corridor to what is laid out in our standards, we need 82 feet of right-of-way. So we're dealing with these different constraints, and how can we fit in sidewalks, bike lanes, and make it safe, and also keep the cars moving. And so, yes, on alternative A, this wide shoulder, this is the downhill direction, so that could be used as a bike lane. It wouldn't be striped that way because we're not designated it as a bike lane, but bicyclists could use it. And uphill, like I said, it would be 10 feet wide, from the edge of this to that. Pedestrians and bicycles will share it. On this alternative, there is a bike lane in the uphill direction. This is a climbing lane.
Right, but it's going against the traffic and.
No, this is going uphill.
Going up.
With the uphill traffic. There'd be a 5-foot
Oh, I see.
sidewalk, a 5-foot
Okay.
bike lane, 11-foot travel
It
lane.
looks like it's going uphill that way.
11-foot travel lane going downhill with the Sharrow, so the cars and the bikes would share the downhill lane. Uphill lane, you would actually have a dedicated bike lane and a dedicated sidewalk. So those two alternatives. The rest of the segments, 2, 3, and 4, there are portions of that corridor that already have sidewalks, and our segments through there are drawings in the packet that show the other segments. And segments 2, 3, and 4 both have 2 travel lanes, 2 sidewalks, 2 bike lanes.
Right, I see that.
It's just this lower
Just that
segment
one.
that really has some tough constraints to deal with. But we do have, either option, sidewalks both sides.
So, what did I read in here? Something like there's just 90 grand to do something. Was that on another page? Was that just for
that's just to do the report, develop the report. We're paying our consultants just under that. That's to put this whole plan together. Then we would have it. Say somebody, there are individuals up off of Myers Road that's part of this, that own 2 or 3 of those lots that in the future could develop. They're very deep lots too, so they lend themselves to future separation and developments. We have a plan to guide them and how we'd want them to deal with the road frontage.
For the, take the historic hat off, put the land use planner hat on. When, not as much in this segment, there's a lot of existing conditions, but especially up on Hilltop, we need an adopted corridor plan because if we want development to help pay for some of this through.
Yeah, I was going to ask where the
we
where the
can't.
funding was
We
coming.
need a plan. So you when you have these corridor plans, you look at funding it through different ways. Some, as development will come in, they can help pay for it, and then we actually can tell you your street segment looks like this in your frontage because we have this adopted plan, and then. For others, we can identify this capital improvement project as we get money and grants, but you need the full corridor plan to adopt first.
Yeah, but when? Like, when do you want to do? When's the ideal?
As soon as funds become available.
So that could be 5 or 10 years.
It could be.
Well, is it federal grant money you're waiting for, or is it?
Once we have the plan in place that identifies exactly what it is that we need to do, then yes, that allows us to go after some of those grants. There's federal grants. ODOT administers a lot of the federal grants. We just missed out on one to Happy Valley, for McLaughlin. Those type of grants, because these are designated as bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements.
But does it become something where the city tries to put out a bond for it?
Not that anybody's ever talked about that I've been working with.
I'm just curious on, so you're spending all this money and doing this, and is it 2 years from now, 10 years from now? Is it so far out there that every few years you reassess, readopt, and pay somebody else to do what you're doing now?
I don't know why we would ever need to reassess and readopt unless, it is kind of what it is. It's basically pretty built out. There isn't really any open space along this corridor. There are quite a few, once you get to the top of the hill, some bigger lots that would lend themselves to be subdivided, which would allow us to then guide them in that development to build that section.
I'm just not a government guy, so.
I can give you an example. We adopted the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan in, want to say 2004, 4. And we did phase 1, which was the from 205 to 10th, and that was the Esplanade. We're working on phase 2 now, which is Dunes Drive. You see the work that's happening, and we are the more expensive, which is the ODOT viaduct from 10th to the tunnel. So the area farthest south on 99E before you get to the tunnel.
Yeah.
That we're actually looking for funding for that, and that's all based on that document that we adopted in 2002. So with that document kind of gives you the legal ability to start raising money.
So the lots that could be developed, is that going to come under HRB?
No, because none of these are in.
No, it looks like you got a little sliver on the 5th.
Yeah.
It's like.
Yeah.
What this does is this.
McLaughlin District is right, the historic right here.
Yeah, you
And
got
the
like
rest of the project.
Yeah.
It's a sliver.
So this is a bit wonky, but we have the ability to require development to do street standards. But a lot of times corridor plans are different than our just standard street standards, and so this corridor plan is really a refinement of our just adopted city standards. So we can really say, property owner A, go to page 25. Your property segment is going to look like this, and this is what you're legally obligated to infill. And that can happen. That can continue to keep happening while they look for funding. And these projects can happen in different phases. They can find, okay, we found money to do sidewalks just on Leland from Warner Parrott to here, and that's our project. But it's all within kind of the
you're just
adopted
filling
plan.
it in. I like the big roundabout.
Yeah, there's so.
But that's long term. That's like what you call not likely to be funded.
Well, no, that's one of those. Yeah, it's unfunded as of yet. However, it's been identified in our transportation system plan, because what happens is when I'll go to this one first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just.
gonna go through.
I thought it was cool.
What happens? They looked at Central Point is the big hiccup in this whole intersection, and you can't signalize this portion of this intersection without impacting the main intersection. And it's by our transportation system plan by 2035, which it's drawn out for. this whole intersection fails.
You mean it has to have
As it is,
signals
as
if
it
it's
is
a
now.
roundabout? Does
Wow.
it have to have signals if it's a roundabout?
No, I'm saying as it is now,
Oh,
It'll
it
fail.
fails.
oh.
It won't be able to handle it.
Yeah.
So this takes into account Central Point Road, and now you're allowed to get all that traffic through there.
No signals.
And yeah, no, there's no signal. It's just like merging on a freeway.
That's
You
great.
just-
Oh yeah,
you
roundabouts
go,
are
you
the
go, you go.
best.
And I mean, that's just the way they work. First time I ever drove one, I was in Ireland. I was on the wrong side of the car, on the wrong side of the road, and I went through
Yeah,
every,
it's scary, I
every
know.
kilometer. I went through another
Me too.
roundabout. So. But you know, there are, because of the size, it has to be to accommodate the traffic that goes through there. There's commercial traffic, there's TriMet, there's school
Yeah,
buses, there's
yeah.
things like that. You know, it has to be a certain size.
Big.
And it has, we've already talked, we talked to the church, we talked to
Painter.
Verhalen, I can't remember his first name, Ron or Richard. We talked to Betty Savage, she owns a strip mall. The city now purchased the Mount Pleasant area, it's gonna be the new police department, so they're aware, but John Lewis, the public works director, has been talking with the city manager and the police captain. So there are impacts to these different properties, but, and yeah, same thing. Once we've got a plan, this is just conceptual in nature. If we decide that this is something we really wanted to go after, we would hire another consultant to start doing the detailed design. We get surveyors, we probably hire a property, I can't think of the key.
Condemnation person?
Well, no, somebody that deals with a negotiator, kind of a property rights negotiator, you know, somebody like that to just deal with property rights and start going through all those negotiations, you know, figuring out what's going on, telling them what we need to do. We don't want to condemn anything, you know, we want to be able to work with everybody. And, you know, right now, I mean, this really has very minimal impact on his property, actually adds a whole lot of space out in front. There's some impact to the parking area on the strip mall, but there's some alternatives out there. You know, right now, we don't want to knock this building down, you know. I mean, we could keep pushing this out of the way to not have any impacts on anybody but the church and this, but that building would come down, so we're trying to keep it in there. The church understands, they're not happy, but, you know, I mean, that's one of those things that we would definitely do. We would work with them to restore their property and sign and landscaping. And, you know, everything is a long ways down the road, but this is really, I mean, the best way to deal with future traffic loads are going to come through is, you know, especially if you've got a lot more development on Central Point out that way and out South End, and as that area keeps growing, there's more and more traffic coming in this way. So yeah, that is part of this whole project. And then another thing we're also doing is we're not just looking at the road itself, but we're looking at different facilities off of the corridor that are there. Like I said, there's Waterboard Park. You know, how can we connect Waterboard to Rivercrest, and Rivercrest and Waterboard over to Singer Creek, and Singer Creek up to Stafford, and then right up here is Gardner Middle School. And we're also looking at, you know, the sidewalk access into the school for the students. And, you know, they have a variety of ways that they get to the school now that aren't paved or, you know, sidewalked or anything. You know, can we do that, make those improvements for them, make it safer? You know, Gardner would be right here on this drawing. So we're looking at all these different paths, you know, ways that we can connect different areas of the community to these facilities and also connect it into the corridor and get people walking and riding their bikes to the parks and the schools.
So, John, I actually have one thing to bring up today, and I think I had talked a while back, but this is more of just confirmation from the board. Do you have one of the segments that goes through by right in front of Rivercrest Park? Is that the?
Well, that's
Okay.
right
So that
here.
would be
This is
that-
Park Drive. This is segment 1.
Okay.
Right here. So 5th and Jackson to Park
Sure.
Drive, and here's Park Drive that goes right to Rivercrest. So this is segment 1 right through there.
Sure. So, if you remember a couple years ago, the board members that were there, and if not, when we did our big citywide survey, we kind of identified Rivercrest as a potential neighborhood that could be a future historic district if the community wanted to, and had a fair amount of historic homes. And there was a question that was asked to me about street improvements, and kind of the response I gave back was Lynn Avenue is actually an historic kind of wagon road that goes before Rivercrest. I mean, it was used to get up to the hill, and it's not the Rivercrest subdivisions didn't create Lynn Avenue. So my thought process was having sidewalks on the Lynn Avenue corridor does not necessarily adversely impact the Rivercrest neighborhood. Whereas even though it's in the Rivercrest platted historic neighborhood, not the neighborhood association boundaries. If this was barreling through the middle of the Rivercrest Park area and there's no sidewalks anywhere, and it was putting brand new 5-foot sidewalks on either side like Kenema, then maybe there needs to be additional contextual look at this. But what I saw from Lynn Avenue is we had existing sidewalks along that corridor.
They just weren't consistent.
It wasn't consistent, and it's not integral inside the historic Rivercrest plat. So that's kind of my direction I gave back to John. And so I just wanted to get concurrence if you had a different view or you wanted to give different direction on how, when this goes through the Rivercrest area. Now, it's not regulatory, but it is a city project, and part of your job as HRB is to kind of give advice and direction back to the city commission.
Well, since it's a main artery, Lynn Avenue is kind of a main artery. It kind of skirts the heart of Rivercrest. It kind of goes on the outside. I don't really see that it's going to affect the historic nature should we decide to go that direction with that area.
Anybody else?
I don't think the proposed improvements affect Rivercrest really at all.
Yeah, it would be different if it was cutting through it, but it's on the outside.
Right, and that's what I want. That's what I thought, and I just wanted to get concurrence with you on that. Okay.
Groovy.
Okay. There is on the city website. I can't remember if the draft plan is on there yet or not.
Check it's right there. Just scroll down.
The corridor plan?
Yeah, the actual it's in draft form right now. There we go. I'm going too fast. No, these are just some of the figures, those pictures on there. So I don't think we have the draft on the website yet. But before we go to the Planning Commission for their approval, we actually need to get it in its final form. And at that point, I'm sure it will be downloaded onto the webpage for people to look at. But yeah, basically, there's more figures there than I have in your packet. But there's a lot of existing condition facility plans. Yeah. So that's kind of all I had. If you have any other questions or comments or direction.
This is a really dumb question because I don't know much about this, but you're hiring Wallace Engineering to do all this stuff. Does the city have the ability to do the engineering and the survey and to figure all this out?
No. Not with the current staffing levels and projects that
Gotcha.
tried to complete. Yeah, I've been here for almost 15 years, and we've never done any in-house design. We always hire consulting firms to do any kind of.
But for that price, you could hire somebody and have it get done and get somebody a job.
It's a one-time shot. It'd be a seasonal employee.
Well, you could pay them really low and spread it out. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we're supposed to? Is that good?
No, I think we can. I don't have anything rest. There's a couple of announcements we can do
But
after, but nothing
this
for
is
this
good.
yet.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. You can those are yours. You
And
can share
more
with friends and
importantly,
family.
happy birthday to John.
Oh, is your birthday today? Then get out of here. Go celebrate.
My wife's not home yet, so
You only turned 40 once.
that's right.
Okay, then let's break.
Okay.
Thank you. HR 1405, 205 3rd Avenue. Approval to use an alternate material to replace the original aluminum windows with vinyl on a 70s fourplex at New National Street. Okay, so I got to read this thing. I got to do that now.
Go for it.
Mine's on.
Mine's on.
It was me.
Test us.
Okay. We will now commence the public hearing on agenda item 14, HR 14-05, a request for approval of an alternate material to replace the original aluminum windows with vinyl on a 70s fourplex in the Kenema National Register District. The criteria for approval of a land use action are contained in Chapter 17 of the Oregon City Municipal Code. The proposed development must comply with applicable provisions contained in the City of Oregon City Comprehensive Plan. Generally, unless otherwise noted, if a request is found to be consistent with municipal code, it is considered consistent with the comprehensive plan. If you wish to participate in this hearing, including challenges for bias or conflict of interest, you must complete the sign-in form located on the table at the front of the room and deliver it to staff. Please do so immediately. The chair will only recognize those who have submitted complete forms. Testimony will be taken in the following order: applicant, testimony in favor, testimony in opposition, rebuttal by applicant. When recognized by the chair, please come forward to the podium, give your name, address, and make your statement. All testimony, arguments, and evidence presented regarding this request must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Please address only the applicable criteria for the decision. Please do not repeat testimony. If you wish, you may choose merely to agree with the previous speaker's statements. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing. Such issues shall be raised and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Commission and the parties an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of persons to participate in the public hearing either orally or in writing precludes that person's right of appeal to the City Council or the LUBA. Written testimony submitted prior to the hearing constitutes participation in the hearing. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed condition of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application. The Commission shall grant such request by continuing the public hearing pursuant to the standards contained in ORS 197.763. Do any of the board members have a conflict of interest or ex parte contact regarding this application?
No.
No.
Anybody visited the site?
Yes.
Okay. That's it. We've reduced it to mood lighting, so we'll turn over to staff for presentation.
Thank you, Chair McLaughlin. This is a little bit of a unique application tonight, and I'd like to not only spell through the thought process staff made on the recommendation for approval, but also leaving tonight ask your direction on further instances within Kenema for non-contributing, non-historic structures if when in-kind replacement for materials is not readily available, and kind of the approach. One option could be you have, through discussion tonight, you have a general recommendation for a staff level review, or you could say we would like staff to come back on a case-by-case basis. My goal is to have just very clear direction tonight on moving forward. So this is a fourplex located in the Kenema National Register District. It's 205 3rd Avenue, and unlike the McLaughlin Conservation District, where you have designated historic structures and non-designated historic structures, and the non-designated don't have exterior review. So like McLaughlin, there's about 1,000 properties, about 300 of them have review for exterior alterations, and then of course new construction. In Kenema National Register District, it's different. All structures potentially have regulatory review. The board has made policies over time to give staff direction for exterior alterations, and specifically the adopted guidelines for alterations and addition, as well as historic review policy 10 on windows. So on a staff level, I was looking for both of those for direction when I met with the property owner who just recently purchased the property and wanted to move forward with replacement of the 70s fix and slider aluminum windows. And I kind of went back and said, well, what do our guidelines say? And if you look at Historic Review Board Policy 10, which I think is probably one of the best clear ways of talking about it, it says, original wood windows are an important architectural feature in any historic building. They are the eyes of the structure, and they convey a sense of hand craftsmanship and detail that cannot be achieved with substitute materials. The Historic Review Board maintains that original windows should be retained and repaired whenever possible, and replacement of windows should be with in-kind materials. And then for all exterior alterations involving windows to all structures in the Kenema National Register District, designated structures in McLaughlin, and landmarks, the applicant will be provided a determination of the window's architectural significance and condition to assist the Historic Review Board to determine the repair and replacement options for the property. And then owners of non-designated structures are encouraged to follow this policy. So working with the owner on, what are the opportunities for in-kind replacement, and the windows that were put in the 1970s, you can't readily find an in-kind replacement without kind of paying. You can find aluminum, you can find metal windows. The question is this architecture to the level that the board feels that the applicant should be held to the standard of finding aluminum windows that match the originals? Or, as a way to look at this structure, this 1974 structure, while it's not 50 years old yet, when it becomes 50 years old, does it have architectural integrity that it could one day become a landmark? So that's the other criteria I was looking at. It would be, and in my termination, I felt like it would not be. It doesn't have sufficient architecture integrity that once it turns 50 years old, we wouldn't therefore include it in the Kenema National Register District as a contributing structure, because our period of significance in Kenema is, 1850 to maybe 1932, and you might be able to add maybe some 1940s buildings. We have a big break in Kenema, and these, can you ask if these will ever reach that level of architectural significance? So on a staff level, I felt no, they would not reach that level of architectural significance, and therefore requiring the applicant to provide in-kind windows in the attempt to retain that existing condition is that, in a sense, over-regulating this house. And what's the larger purpose of what to do with a 1970s fourplex in a National Register District? So on my level, I supported replacement of these windows with vinyl windows for this specific reason. I found staff that it would have a low likelihood of retaining architectural significance, that in other cases, like a 1940s home that may have metal windows, might have a lot higher opportunity for gaining architectural significance over time. This has a lot less ability even after it's 50 years old. And that the in-kind replacement is much more specialized, whereas vinyl windows today would have been the in-kind replacement of the 70s. So, what is the kind of the windows that would readily have been available at that time for kind of the quality of the architecture? So, in this situation, I did support the applicant's request to replace it, but the board could make a finding that the other two 70s structures in Kenema can also allow on a staff level that ever came up, or the board could ask, no, we think this should be on a case-by-case basis, and the applicant should go in front of the Historic Review Board and make the case based on the architectural location, what the windows are being removed, and how that relates to the other historic homes in their area. So in this situation, based on its location and its architectural style, I feel like this is a reasonable replacement, and it should be approved, but through the Historic Review Board and not at a staff level. I'm going to show a little bit of additional photos. These show the fixed windows. There are also additional slider windows on the side elevation, and this shows the replacement slider window. The fixed window would pretty much be that version, but a fixed version. Shows the location. It's pretty invisible from the third, but you can see the rear elevation from McLaughlin Boulevard. It's located up a little bit higher, but it is visible in the rear. I think that's. So on that point, that's what I'm recommending based on the Historic Review Board Policy 10 and our design guidelines for alterations to allow this for its specific case, and because the building has a low opportunity for architectural integrity and additional designation. So I'm open for questions. Back to, there we go.
Oh, I guess not.
Okay, well, I can bring the
Yeah, thank you.
property owner.
If the applicant wants to come forward, state your name and address, and
It's Gary Clark, is 12020 Hazeldale Avenue in Oregon City.
So you bought this and you want to fix it up?
Yes.
Fantastic. Do you have any comments on anything what you're thinking, or,
Exterior-wise, I had went around the neighborhood, and there's a lot of other homes that are there that I couldn't tell whether they were any of the homes that were part of the historical relevance, but there were none that I could even find that had aluminum windows in the district. And I had done some searching online. I had called around to places, and I believe on a higher scale they do have some aluminum windows that are out there, but they're still not the same type because they're dual pane. So these are the single pane, and as far as the mechanisms that are with them, there was nothing that I could find as a suitable replacement. And I figured that the windows that I did select would be more in conforming visibly with the other existing homes that were in there. There was no architectural significance to those windows, and so for the market, those were the typical type of windows that would be placed in.
Yeah, good old T111.
Do we know the other buildings of this type in the district? What type of windows they have?
Good question. I wasn't able to chance to do. There's and I can do that research if you want me to. There's a apartment building on the south end of Kenema off of 3rd Avenue, right when you come in. And that is a 60s era, and I believe those do have aluminum windows. But that's really the only other one I know of.
But you said there was another 70s building?
One or two.
They probably have
yeah.
aluminum or since been replaced with
Yeah.
something or other.
Well, I guess that's what I'm reacting to is to if you didn't find any other aluminum windows in the district, what the other buildings of your type had.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, you could probably have a myriad of homes built in the 70s there, and they'd all be the same. Single wall construction, T111 with aluminum windows. I mean, it's a 60s, 70s gig, and even into the early 80s. But, yeah, I don't know, kind of makes sense.
My goal was really to find something as a suitable replacement that would be more in like with the visible nature of the other structures, regardless of their age.
Do these windows, these replacement windows, do you know if they have a flange on them that kind of snaps in and creates a flange around the siding? Or is it a window that you're going to put in that has a piece of trim that goes around them?
It's a trim.
It's a vinyl trim?
No.
It's a wood trim.
Wood trim.
So are you re-siding, or are you just keeping the T111?
There is some actual repairs.
Yeah.
There's ground contact in the north side of the building with some of the existing T111, but it's going to be replaced with the same.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just guessing. It's the 70s, and it's probably single wall construction. Like the T111 is the plywood, it's the outer face.
Right.
And when you start cutting those out and stuff, you'll see studs, So I didn't know if you were wanting to lap siding this or just keep it the way it is, but
No, it's going to be retained the same.
gotcha.
Eventually, are you going to replace all the windows, or are you just right now?
All of them.
Yeah, and they're all going to be the same with the wood trim?
Yeah, they'd all be done at once.
Oh, I see. I thought you were
So-
just
Great.
replacing the bad ones.
I mean,
Do you-
The windows, the locking mechanisms and the rollers on some of the windows don't
They
even
just
work,
don't
so
work.
it's kind of a safety issue.
I
they're
see.
beyond their life.
Are you planning to paint the structure at all? Change the color of
Yes.
this facade?
Yes.
Is that going to be darker or lighter?
It's going to be not blue. It's going to be more earth tones.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you going to change out any of the doors while you're at this?
I probably will, but it'll be with similar doors. There's in the upper left unit, one of the door frames is damaged, so it's going to need to be replaced, but everything is going to be replaced with similar elements.
Okay. John, is that something we need to address or should
The
address?
doors?
Yeah,
I think when we talk about the windows, it could be all-inclusive.
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Thank you. I do have two testimonies here to start with. First is Ken Basinger. If you want to come up, you got 3 minutes. State your name and address.
Ken Basinger, 516 First Avenue in Kenema, and I'm representing the Kenema Neighborhood Association here. We discussed this in our meeting on June 19th, and including Bob Seward, who isn't here tonight, sent me back here to report that we support Christina's recommendations based on the definition of in-kind replacement being you can't get like for like, but the position that the vinyl windows hold in today's market is the position that was formerly held by the aluminum windows in the 70s and 60s. So that kind of makes it an in-kind replacement as much as is possible. We did not want to make this, however, a universal endorsement of this kind of replacement. We feel it has to be considered on a case-by-case basis. This one is unique because it is visually isolated from all of Kenema, and it probably always will be. And so we would have less concern about it conflicting with the historical homes than we would if it was right next to one. So that was our position, and we did vote on that and unanimously support the
Case by case.
staff recommendation.
Okay. Thank you. Denise?
We're trying to set up. Good evening, Denise McGriff, and I'm here representing myself as an individual citizen who is very supportive of preservation and conservation in Oregon City, as you very well know. I don't need to talk to you about the significance of the Kenema National Register District, and unfortunately, over time, there have been some new construction which, you know, depending on your opinion, you could say either fits in or really doesn't fit in. My main concern about this particular application, and it's not that I don't have any sympathy for the property owner, but it does point out another thing to me that I have talked to the City Council about on several occasions. We need to do yearly notification, because having someone come to you and say that they didn't know, I don't think is an excuse. It's important for people in the Kenema National Register District as well as McLaughlin to get that yearly notification, and we are trying to work with Christina to get it, at least the notice to go out in McLaughlin. I can't speak for Kenema, but it's real important. People, you know, you come into Kenema, there's signs everywhere, Kenema National Register District, so it's a little hard to not know. What I want to suggest is maybe an alternate. I'm not a big fan of vinyl windows on anything because of their lack of embedded energy. They don't last. Their shelf life is, you know, in another 10 years or so, this gentleman may be replacing these because they're not designed to hold up. There's the off-gassing. There's all sorts of reports that that have been done about problems with vinyl windows. So I'm sympathetic. What I'd like to suggest is that maybe some alternatives. I didn't see anywhere in the report about the number of windows that were going to be replaced, or in the documentation where the applicant looked to find windows. Just usually there's an applicant submittal and you kind of get all that stuff. So those are some questions I have right off the get-go. I mean, just on this thing I can see 4, but I don't know, actually more than 4, so about 6 or 8. Christina did point out that there is one elevation that is highly visible from 99E, and when I was going to Canby day before yesterday, I went that way on purpose just so I could make sure that I could see it, and you can see it. And I want to suggest maybe putting something that's more compatible, a different type of a metal window in there. I don't know if the applicant checked with the Rebuilding Center or the Habitat for Humanity store, but over the last 6 months I have been there a lot doing other rehab work on a different project, and I know they have a lot of windows. They have a lot of vinyl windows, they have a lot of metal windows, they have a lot of wood windows. I'm glad to know that he's going to put a trim around them, and I hope that the trim will be not just a little teeny thin strip, but something that looks a little more substantial. I think you have a real opportunity here to help this owner make this building a little more compatible, a little less the sore thumb in the neighborhood. It's not a sore thumb, but it's not contributing. But it could be made a little bit better, and so I appreciate Derek's asking whether the building's going to be painted, and Jonathan saying, are you going to put a trim around it? Because I think that will really go a long way. I would hope that if you do approve vinyl windows, that they're not the white ones, because they really stand out a lot. That it could be maybe they come in colors, so it's not quite so visible. And I agree with Ken's premise that you really do not want to establish a precedent for this. I think it really has to be on a case-by-case basis, and this person coming in has a circumstance, but I really don't want to know that the next person comes and says, well, he did it, so how come I can't do it? And again, you guys have heard this in other applications. I don't want to beat the dead horse to death. I just really feel that there have got to be some other alternative besides vinyl.
Thanks. I've got to cut you off there, Denise.
So I'm done.
Thanks.
So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yep. Does the applicant want to come up for a rebuttal or no?
The statements made, I guess, are in contrast to what the intent is for the historic district. There are certain buildings that fall under the different criteria, and there are certain buildings that are not. So according to the descriptions of the requirements, I think that I don't think that there's an issue in establishing that there's not an in-kind replacement. As far as the windows being white, the trim being white, most of the other windows in the district are white, so I'm not sure how that could be considered out of standard for what's in the district. I think that the requirements as laid out by the descriptions that the district want have been fulfilled here, and I'm actually kind of surprised.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions for anybody before I close this?
I would like to just make sure that I'd like to get my questions answered before you close your public hearing, because if not, I will be asking for a continuance. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to close the meeting, or the public hearing, so we can talk amongst ourselves, even though you can all hear us. Does anybody have any comments on this?
I have a few.
Yeah.
There are thermally improved aluminum nail fin windows that could be used. That look very much the same. I will say that this staff has a good point in that if this building was built today, it would not have those, because they're not very thermally efficient and not very desirable. I don't believe this is, well, it's not a historic building, it's not contributing, and I don't think it will be in the future, which really makes me look at this as, I don't want to offend the owner, but not to the level of architectural significance as other single-family homes in this district. It really is kind of an oddity in that. And I would not support vinyl windows in really any other project than this one, and perhaps that other multifamily, but I'd rather look at them as a case-by-case basis, not have a blanket statement for those. When the owner brought up, most of the windows are painted white, whether it be true white or a variation of white. That was my initial thought when Denise brought up her comment as well. So I concur with the owner on that whether they be white or not, And if he has to replace them because he makes a poor investment, I feel that's his choice to make. There are different qualities of vinyl windows that can last longer, but if he makes a poor investment, this is on him to come back in front of us and go through the process to replace them again. I don't think that he could go to a rebuilding center or other venue to find windows. These are very specific sizes that aren't readily available, and he needs a lot of the same size. The north side and the south side, I believe, too, didn't really have any windows on them, as far as I could see. The primary elevations being the east and west had most of the windows, as far as I saw. No. So
Sorry, these are the windows that are on the elevation that's visible from McLaughlin?
I believe so.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what I had to say.
I'd like to just address the architectural insignificance of this property. It's not the HRB's role to make an architecturally insignificant property into an architecturally significant property by asking the owner and the person that's doing a repair to put on certain kinds of trim just in case it might be architecturally significant in the future. I think that's over and above the call of something that is not a non-conforming property in an area such as Kanema, where they have so many non-conforming properties. To put this burden on the homeowner or the property owner is kind of over and above what I think is necessary.
So my initial thinking, I was just wondering, this is why I asked the question about color, is that, the aluminum is sort of a darker grayer color versus white, and I could see how, a lot of the other windows in the district are white or off-white, but sort of the introduction of trim changes the style of the building, and so that's my only observation, I suppose, is that that if there was a chance that this building would ever become contributing in all of its 70s glory, that by introducing trim and vinyl windows that you would rob it of that opportunity. Shall we say, I don't think that it matters in terms of that this building is not going to be contributing. So that's all.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Yeah, I think some of it could be on a staff level, but in answer to some of Denise's questions, there are signs everywhere. It's Kanema Historic District, all over, and you go into it. But I got to tell you, if I didn't know that and I didn't know the historical significance of that neighborhood, and I walked in and saw this property, I would not think Historic District on any level. I would think this isn't historic. This has nothing to do with the district, and maybe on a naive level it might be, there's no way this could be. So that's something where you can't completely blame somebody for their naivete looking at this thinking it's historic. It's 70s, and I think I agree that going to a rebuilding center, it's a non-issue. You can't find things to match, and they wouldn't be efficient anyway. And if you were trying to enhance this or try and do something to try and help it, would only hinder the look of it. I think it would detract from what this building is. It's a 70s box with a lot of windows in it. It's a rental. If you're trying to make this something that's not, I think you're negating the purpose of what the district's trying to do. I think this was a inexpensively built structure, and I think putting in the windows the way they are without trim, it's actually pretty blah. I think bringing windows in with the trim will only enhance the property. And I think the whole idea here is this is a very non-historic, non-designated building. And to try and make it something other than that, like I said, it doesn't do justice to the district and what the district's trying to do. I think any form of improvement will only help, because as a comment was made, there's a lot of ahistoric properties in the district that don't help the district at all. And if there's some way to take some blight and make it better, I don't see the fight in that. Now, I agree with the neighborhood that it should be a case-by-case situation, and everyone's different. I get that. And I also disagree with the longevity of vinyl. I disagree with that. Vinyl's been proven to last longer than 5 to 10 years. So, I mean, but I'm on both sides of this, but I'm not going to try and make this a historic building. It's just not going to happen. And I'm not going to have an opinion that we need to change this for the betterment of the district. I think it would only detract from it. I get the whole vinyl thing. I've been preaching that for quite a few years, many years, but I agree with staff. But that's my opinion. But I'm not here to propagate the situation, because I think Denise, you might have mentioned that, or maybe it was Christina, I can't remember, but if this was a house built in the 40s or 50s, it's a non-issue. We would be not talking about vinyl, but it's not contributory and it's not historic, and so I would agree with staff for the most part. But I totally get and understand where the neighborhood's coming from and where Denise is coming from. But I guess that's my point, if I keep reiterating, is you don't want to try and make something that's completely out of context with the historic district and try and make it something it's not. I mean, you just can't. I don't know. Does anybody want to say I'm a nut job on that? Or
No, I don't think so. I think there are buildings of an era that would lose their appeal, removing aluminum windows and going to something else. I just don't feel that this is one of those buildings.
Right. The appeal right now is pretty bad, and they're end of life.
Yeah.
But I would make a comment in terms of in kind, because the use of vinyl necessitates the addition of trim.
Not necessarily.
Well, at least the ones that they were.
Yeah, and that's why I asked what kind they are, because there are some vinyl windows that have a external flange that actually snaps kind of on the siding, so it has like a flat trim to it. That's why I was asking what they were doing. So there are different types.
So I guess, whether it's a replacement type or if it's a new construction type, and if the flange has to be concealed by trim that goes around it. So my only thought there is that I see the in-kind in terms of vinyl to aluminum sort of basic box building. That's what you would do today if that building was built today. But that if the trim was necessitated, then that sort of obscures the in-kind a little bit. But then I also see the point that the trim might actually dress the building up just a little bit.
I think a lot.
Yeah. So you're pointing that out as a finding, perhaps, that the in-kind approval would be for aluminum to vinyl, but that doesn't necessarily have to do with the trim. We're just allowing the trim.
I suppose so.
Okay.
That the logic of aluminum to vinyl makes sense. It's where if the trim is necessitated, then it doesn't make sense in terms of in-kind.
Okay.
You know,
I'm sorry.
The meeting's closed. I'd have to open it back up, which I can. I can open it if you want to come up and say something. The meeting's open. Yeah, come up.
I guess my point would be whether it was an in-kind replacement and there were the aluminum windows available, you would still run into the situation where you would have to actually remove and replace the window with a window that would be non-new construction, and you would still have the flanges on the outside that would attach the window to the structure, and that would typically be covered up by additional trim. So I think that would be the same scenario regardless.
Okay. Thank you. Denise, did you want to say something, or any other comments? Or Ken, while I have it open?
I just wanted to get my questions answered.
Did I get them answered or not?
No.
What? Okay, ask another one.
I asked how many windows were being replaced, because that was not indicated in the report, and there wasn't any documentation submitted by the applicant that I could find online. And then my other question had to do with, what was my other question?
You do a head count.
Where he, what other sources, since the staff report indicated that he was unable to locate any windows, I was just curious as to what was the extent of where he had called and looked and who he had talked to and what window manufacturers, just so that you get all that on the record. Because that was not in the, there was no applicant submittal.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that when we're done. Ken, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to comment a little bit on the trim, because having purchased 3 new houses during the 1970s, 2 of which had raw aluminum single pane windows and 1 had anodized aluminum double pane windows, I'm somewhat of an expert on the genre. And the upgraded side of the house always had wood trim around the aluminum
and
windows.
And then nothing on the back.
They didn't do it on the back.
Right.
But they always made the front look better by putting the wood trim on there.
Builders still do that today.
And it would be consistent with the architecture of this building to do that. It would just take it from the original entry-level design to half a notch up to the front side design.
Well, I think we can make a finding that if all the windows would be trimmed out. Okay, then I'm gonna.
Actually, in the
do we have a
applicant
count?
has answered those 2 questions.
Okay, can you come up and answer these 2 questions of how many windows you have?
I believe the actual count is 19 to include. There's also a couple of windows that are on the side. The back of the structure has, I believe, 12. I don't have the thing up in front of me to show the front side of it, but I think total there are 19, because there's a laundry facility downstairs,
I was gonna say,
and it has the same
you'd
type
have
of windows.
an
on the
even
side.
amount, so you must have an extra room or something. So that would be the 19.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
an odd number there.
And then
as far as the places that I check with,
Yeah.
check with Home Depot for these style of windows, as well as Lowe's, Canby Builders, and then did a little bit of checking online. I didn't track the actual sites, but the response that I was getting, even after phone calls, was that they're not available.
Okay, thank you. I did find, well, for what I do for a living is there was a project that I had in West Lynn that was built in the 70s with these very same windows, and the owner was very adamant he wanted to try and save one of these windows, but he had to go to a custom glass place in Oregon City to have it custom made, custom milled. I mean, it was a very big hassle, but he wanted to keep that window in check with everything because it was one, but the lengths that he went through to try and replicate these windows was pretty crazy and very costly.
Do you know if he still needs some?
Okay, I'm going to close the meeting. Okay, so 19 windows and some research on looking for windows in kind.
So because I'll be writing additional findings in the
Right.
notice of decision, I heard a lot, but when whomever makes the motion, I'll include the comments that I heard in the discussion previously. But if you could encapsulate
Well, I
your
know
general
one of those
findings.
findings would be that all the windows would have a trim on it, and I think we need to suggest the size of trim so that one of the comments was you don't want something very small and insignificant. I don't know if we even have the parameter to suggest size of trim. I don't know.
Well, the applicant is asking for a modification, so you have ability to put conditions on that request. As an authority, the question is, what level of detail do you want to do?
Do we have a sense of in these structures what the upgraded front facade, the type of dimension the trim would have?
I think all the trim would be at a minimum either 5 quarter by 4 or 1 by 4. In this case, probably a 1 by 4.
So 4 inches.
Yeah,
3.5.
3.5, yeah.
Yeah, but that would be dressing it up and enhancing it. But it'd be on all the windows.
And that would be wide enough to make the cut you need to remove the existing window, put in a new one.
And trim it out.
Yeah, and cover up those cuts.
Yeah. Won't be able to flash it, but so that would be a finding. I think another one you had mentioned. What I forgot because you asked. What was it?
Because it's a non-historic and non-contributing building, and we don't expect it to be one.
Right. But Jonathan had said something.
I think he was talking about color.
No,
was
Jonathan
it-
talked about in
He
kind.
was talking about color.
Color.
Oh, well, I did mention color, but and what I was sort of fishing for there was just that the building is sort of tone on tone now, and which so the gray versus with the bluish whatever, and that the introduction of white would potentially no longer be tone on tone. But I don't know if that matters.
But we can't regulate color, but it sounds like with earth tones, it'll certainly soften it.
Mm-hmm. And you were planning on painting it.
Yeah. So I think that was it. I think we talked about as a case by case basis was a finding, or that was a staff thing. I think.
Yeah. I would move for the approval of HR 1405 with the findings noted.
Would someone want to second that?
I'll second.
We put it to a vote.
Sure. Jonathan Stone?
Sorry, exactly. What are we approving?
The staff recommendation of allowing the replacement with a required minimum 1 by 4 inch trim,
On a case-by-case basis.
and then also as providing staff further direction that this should come back again on a case-by-case basis.
So you would say aye or nay?
Aye.
Cindy Toll?
Aye.
Derek Metzen?
Aye.
Chair McLaughlin?
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
And,
Meeting adjourned.
just real briefly.
No, it's not. Thank you all for coming.
Sorry.
We're done with business of the board that's scheduled for tonight, but we have design advice,
Not quite.
or what was the advice? It's been.
We have a
Ben
gentleman
James.
who just purchased a property, and I'll bring it up. He will be coming to the board next month. He just wanted to introduce himself and just kind of let him know what he's looking for, and that maybe you can percolate in your brain for the next month. So I'm going to bring up the
Oh.
building, but you'll not be. This is not a design advice. 'Cause
Right.
It was not on the hearing.
Okay, and there's nothing here. We're done with the public stuff. So come on up.
Thank you.
What's the address?
659.
High Street.
Magic of Google Video.
Where's High? I mean, where High?
It's
Oh, is it the parking lot?
Well, there's a structure underneath it. So you're at the elevator. There actually is a
Yeah, I see the elevator here, but is it the parking lot? Or
Yeah,
it's
but there's
Yeah,
actually
it's
a
the
building
building underneath the parking lot.
the building underneath. Is
Oh,
that the one that's
and
painted
it
orange?
faces-
Yeah, is the parking lot's the roof.
Don't sound so excited.
No, I'm just trying to figure out where. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I just see the. So it's the orange building underneath,
Yes.
Yeah.
and you bought that.
Not yet, so if you want to talk me out of it. This
No, isn't that like a Red Soils thing or something?
I
Is
might-
that-
No, no.
No, but they painted it, or they used to own it, or somebody did.
don't know.
No, but it's that one that's got all the glass on the.
I know someone who sold it, and they're really glad they did. No, not the bank.
So this is in the district, but it's commercial.
Yeah, so Mr. James will be coming in for an addition to a non-contributing structure or new construction, whatever we want to determine how this goes forward on this property. So he just wanted to introduce himself, let you know that he'll be coming back next month if he purchases it.
And you want to add on like where the parking lot is, like on top?
So I mean, just real briefly, my engineer suggests that what we would do would be add on to over the parking lot. So we'd keep the parking lot for parking and then build up potentially 2 stories.
So even higher.
Right, yeah. And this is a great piece of property, and it's right behind the elevator. You've got the views of potentially the falls and the bridge. And I ride my bike every day to work, and I take the elevator up, and I walk out of the elevator, and I see this overbearing weeds sticking out of a flower garden, and it could be so much more. And I did a building on 1209 7th Street. And Cindy, I think you may have been on the HR board at the time I went through that process. And we had a 70s style architecture in mind with, it wasn't quite T111, but we got steered into something that I'm really happy with the results. So
Wait, is it the building on Jackson and 9th?
Jackson 7th, yeah.
And 7th, yeah, we approved that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was like a garage thing.
Right.
You still have the garage below, and we approved all that. I remember that.
And it was we get a lot of compliments on what we ended up with, but part of this process, going through the HR board and working with the city, helped us so much. And so I kind of wanted to have the same spirit on this project, and I know I'll need help as well as design, but I think it could be a phenomenal piece of property, and I don't want to just detract from what we have in Oregon City. I mean, I'm kind of spitting with Oregon City now and really developing roots here, but I want to do something that enhances what we have. So there's opportunity.
That's a boatload of engineering.
Yeah.
I got a client that's
Toughy.
an engineer, so he can charge me double. It works great.
Well, I don't know if you know it or not, but there was a lot of really nice old property there that got destroyed
Yeah.
in the 70s and went completely away. And
So one thing that, because we have the Poe building next door, which is not regulated, but actually is a good mid-century modern architectural style, the brown building. And this is a mid-century modern, so some of it is kind of trying to understand how exactly you make an addition onto existing mid-century modern building in our conservation district. So that's just kind of that thought
That's
process,
tricky.
knowing that there are a lot of views looking up from downtown. How do you do it in a respectful way that's kind of as unimposing as possible?
What is the classification of this building?
The architectural-
Designated?
No, not at all. So it's going to be, we're going to review it either as, it's going to be a big enough addition that it'll fall under the new construction design guidelines. So the board could be looking at continuing the mid-century modern aesthetic as we go up.
You're opening a can of worms for us.
So it's more of, there's some different ways to look at it. Going historic goes one way, but then it also creates a much heavier mass as you
Oh,
look
yeah.
at from below. There's
Well-
you have a mid-century neighbor next door, so there's some validity in that. It's just kind of the depth of how you design this so it becomes an asset.
Well, part of it is, you're right, viewing below, you got the elevator there, and you got this. I mean, I think the bigger hurdle would be the neighborhood association.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
And the adjoining neighbors, especially
Yeah.
the ones with the houses to the left. But if you're going to go up and make this a elevated structure, can we
have
just
an
make it
architect?
simple?
No, but I'll work with one.
And you don't have to give advice right now because this wasn't on the agenda. But
No,
he was
I-
here, and you can. It was just
I'll
more.
just tell
of,
you how it's going to
Well,
be.
the
I
reason
don't-
I asked is that if you get several different
But I want to give the
styles,
neighborhood
they-
association the ability to be at this
You know.
meeting since it wasn't noticed.
And then-
So you don't.
schedule
there's-
a meeting, maybe
He'll,
just with her,
he'll come back at a
you know,
design
and
advice
say,
noticed
which
meeting.
do you think would
But design
would
advice
fly,
means
Yeah.
plans
you know,
next month.
or
to
which
look
has
at.
the potential.
True, but this was not part of the hearing notice, so the neighborhood association wasn't aware. This is more just a meet and
Right,
greet
but-
to come back.
So are you
Not
thinking
go down
you-
in detail,
No.
just sketch it?
You're not going to have. Are you going to have conceptual drawings for a meeting next month?
I could, yeah. I certainly could. Although that might be a little bit premature. What
That's
I really-
probably premature. I would think
Yeah.
you'd want to figure
I
this
think-
out,
I
get to
think-
the neighborhood, then
Yeah.
come here.
Yeah, you could go to a neighborhood meeting with your designs.
Because why have preliminary drawings when he doesn't even know if he has to go classical or mid-century modern,
Or even buy the property.
or even buy the property?
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's great, but it's the neighborhood you have to deal with.
Sure, and I'll work with them too. And worst case scenario, I'm almost committed at this point to buy the property, and so I want to buy it, but I want to enhance what's there. So I have ideas of something more, but I want to improve it.
My question is like where it ramps up. Does it ramp up to keep the elevation of the lower floor?
Which is quite extensive. I think they're 12-foot plus ceilings.
So conceivably, you could drop that down to lower it to try and, you know what I mean, to try, because I keep thinking that you're going to have this big box up there, and everybody's going to really have a hard time with that.
Yeah, theoretically, I think you could drop that down. Although
There's a lot of structural work.
it's concrete, it's solid reinforced concrete down there with a concrete lid. It's
Well, the thing is, that was probably built in the 60s or 70s. None of it's
60s.
seismic. None of it. I mean, your engineering is just going to be ginormous just to make that work.
Well, what he's going to do, I'm making an assumption here, is create a box on top with columns that go down through the existing structure.
Yeah.
And the big problem with this building is there's a lot of water intrusion. So you've got to dig a lot of stuff up anyways to get in and fix that. So
Seismic,
Yeah.
seismic.
there's a value add here.
There would be no reason why you wouldn't. If you've got money and you can do something and make it better, then yeah, go for it.
We're all for it.
Are you thinking restaurant?
brewery, right? Everybody wants another brewery. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know.
Brewery?
Downstairs maybe retail, and then up above office. And it would be I would move my office from 1209 down here, so it would be light office upstairs and maybe retail down below.
I guess my only other advice would be, I don't know how big that lot is with the building. I mean, I guess another thought would be is maybe when you're talking to an architect or somebody, that maybe you soften it instead of just a big box, that maybe it's something that's not the entire thing, but soften it, and it, I don't know. If it's going to be that high with parking, maybe half of it is and half, I don't know. You could tear it down, something.
Yeah.
So that it's not so kapow.
You bet. Yeah. I wanted to add to not distract from what we have.
Right. A good architect should be able to help you with that.
I know a few.
All right.
Not on a single one. Myself included.
Well, I hope that helps. I don't know.
Hey, yeah. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're adjourned. Fourth and